All right, so I wrote Good Fat is Good for Women, which is for women, but all women, and also men like reading it. And now I just published, or as of tomorrow, it'll be out, Good Fat is Good for Girls, Puberty and Adolescence. And I have two daughters. I have three children, and two of them are female, and they all went through adolescence. So I was very much, well, I've known this for a long time, but so many of their friends are on antidepressants and they don't eat meat. So I kind of put the two together and I wanted to show women and younger women and the mothers of younger women how important, and also boys, they experience puberty as well, but how to address the health issues that are associated with puberty and adolescence, just as there are health issues associated with menopause, which is, Good Fat is Good for Women. Menopause is addressing those supposed health issues. Absolutely, the health issues are real, but what are they caused by? They are more and more common. Mm-hmm. That is the issue. More and more prevalent. Rates are higher and higher, and that's what I'm addressing. So what are the treatment? The treatment is more hormones because it's associated with a hormonal imbalance. Well, absolutely. But I also call, just like I've called breast cysts, goiter of the breasts, endometriosis and PCOS, endometriosis would be goiter of the uterus, and PCOS could be goiter of the ovaries. These are tissues that can very easily become hyperplastic. So what are those tissues looking for? They're looking for iodine. They're looking for balanced blood sugar. They're looking for a balanced endocrine system. So if the endocrine system is not balanced, the tissue will respond trying to get more of what it needs, and that is hyperplastic. I've noticed that most of my patients can link their current health issues in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s to their adolescence. And that's one of, going into, so when you start researching something, and it started with a personal interest, I have children, I was an adolescent too, obviously, but then I did so much research and I have many patients who shared this with me. So I looked into it a little bit, more deeply. I did a deep dive into it, just like I did into the book about menopause. I mean, medications, what do? They suppress function. I mean, if you have an acute injury, then you need medication because you have to treat that. They have to sew your leg back on. They have to give you benzodiazepines that when they sew your leg back on, you don't go into shock, because any kind of incision in the body will cause you to go into shock. So they have to give you things to mediate that response, basically a stress response. But a health issue, other than a chronic health issue, is not due to imbalance. It's not due to the absence of the medication. So we have to figure out, as you always say, we have to go to the root cause, and the root cause is not the absence of that medication. We're born, the fetus, there's a lot of hormonal change, right? Actually, cortisol, all of the androgens, cortisol, they are secreted in huge amount, because it's not just a stress response, it's also growth, brain function. All these things are linked to the developing fetus. There is a surge in hormones until, birth, and then they go down until adolescence. Think of all the growth that's happening in a fetus when it's developing and comes to term. So during adolescence, I mean, I like to use this just like I call menopause a birth. Adolescence, puberty is a birth, because you're changing from one organ, from one kind of, you're changing from a child to being a fertile being. And in order to do that successfully, it's quite important to your physiology to be able to be a good fertile being, to be a fertile being that has healthy offspring. The balance is crucial, and there will always be, if something is missing, there will be a negative feedback response to try to bring it back to balance. It's interesting that we talked about, we're going to talk about precocious puberty, but puberty in humans evolved to be, in females, 17, 18. So we weren't supposed to be fertile beings at 8, 9, and 10.
Right.
Menstruation indicates this person is now fertile, so they can get pregnant. Did we evolve to get pregnant that young? No, we did not. Our brain, it's neuroplastic until basically the age of 28. So it doesn't really have to do with puberty in that sense, because we know in I make a distinction between puberty and adolescence, because adolescence is associated, and now more even older, with puberty is associated with menstruation, formation of sexual characteristics, and then adolescence is associated with something different. I would say talking back to your parents, wanting to, drive a car. I mean, it's different. It's not the formation of sexual characteristics. So the brain actually continues to develop to grow until the age 28. There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of hormones, a lot of hormonal changes happening, a lot of signaling going on. And all of that actually is triggered by thyroid hormone, which is basically the ringleader. We've heard this a million times. Thyroid is the conductor of the orchestra, and it definitely is. So thyroid hormone basically triggers this change to make a child into a fertile entity that can then have offspring. These hormones that they're taking, the synthetic hormones that they're taking, aren't really recognized by the body as such. Okay. So what your receptors are looking for, the hormone cascade, the steroid hormone cascade starts as cholesterol, right? And then it turns into, in both the ovaries and the adrenals, and it turns into all these different hormones. So on the left side of the cascade of the chart, there's the stress response, right? And on the right side, there's all the way at the end, there's testosterone and then estradiol. So in order for it to get all the way over there, things have to be quite balanced. What synthetic hormones actually do is they're not replacing the testosterone, the estrogen. They are raising cortisol levels, and that absolutely has an effect on the brain.
Okay. And then in terms of a hormone medication, birth control, is that a hormone?
Yes, but they raise cortisol levels.
Right.
They actually raise cortisol levels, and that's how they are a wrench in the works in the HPA axis and the HPT axis. They're basically this wrench dropped into this delicate net of all these things connected together to each other, and it throws everything off. It causes a stress response in the system. So you could say, we know that cortisol can affect amygdala formation, cortex formation. All these things are affected by cortisol. So that's really what those hormones do. And the reason why so many women say this made me feel better when they took the hormones, they raised their cortisol levels.
Okay.
And when so you're giving a child, an 8-year-old, because she has ADHD, which is actually what is happening, the contraceptive pill.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I know they gave it for hormonal acne. I didn't know that they gave it for that young.
Because they don't want to give the girls amphetamines because since they're girls, and of course girls need hormones, even though they're 8, 9, and 10,
right?
And that supposedly the hormones will modulate cognitive function. That's what they tell menopausal women, don't they? Mm-hmm. You're going to lose your brain if you don't take synthetic, HRT. They say the same thing to the 8-year-old. So they have kind of swerved from amphetamines for ADHD to birth control pills.
What is causing us to get our menses early?
Well, as I describe in the book, carbohydrates, because it wasn't until we invented agriculture and started eating grain that menstrual ages plummeted. So the more carbohydrates you eat, the earlier a girl is going to menstruate. And hunter-gatherers, 17, 18. And we have seen through history, and all those papers are in my book, basically, how not just the age of menstruation lowered, but also the actual formation of the hips. Giving birth became a lot more dangerous and painful with the advent of agriculture. Levels, cortisol, it's a stimulant. It's that wrench into the endocrine system. Our human endocrine system evolved to eat meat and fat, full stop. Did not evolve to eat carbohydrates. When we ran out of meat and fat, we didn't die if we ate a handful of berries. Maybe a bunch of our forebears died eating a few vegetables, and they figured, let me ferment this and fewer will die. So, but that's really what it is. It's quite frightening if you read about what happened to humankind since, as how our bodies changed and our lifestyles changed with the advent of agriculture. My youngest had a car accident when she was 18. She almost died. Her adrenals kept her alive. She went into shock. She stayed alive. I had to treat her adrenals, and I've told this to many patients. I had to treat her adrenal function for several years. When she became pregnant, she was never hypothyroid. When she became pregnant, I insisted that they test more. Where she was living, they didn't do free T3, free T4, and I insisted on doing that. And she was indeed hypothyroid. So I'm positive that her becoming hypothyroid, developing hypothyroid, low thyroid function was because of the shock to her system when she had that car accident. So she will be treating her thyroid until she's done nursing. The stress response trauma can cause low thyroid function because what is trauma? It is very nutritionally expensive.
Yes. Yes.
It's all about nutrients. That's what we're always talking about. If you have adequate nutrients and you can reduce the stress, you should be fine. Fluoride in our water, bromide in our couches, and I don't know, PFAs, toxins, as you said, plastic bottles sitting on your dashboard, quercetin that everybody wants to take, tea they want to drink. I mean, the mint. I mean, all mint plants are goitrogens. Millet, yams, so many things are brassica, broccoli. It's just, we didn't evolve to eat these things, and we are just shoving them into our systems constantly. Now, if you're eating a high-fat carnivore diet, you're kind of like, by process of, you're kind of like shoving some of those things. If you're eating more of the good stuff, a little bit of those things won't cause an issue, right? So, but if you have an issue, how are you going to fix it if you don't remove those things? Well, if you talk about Prozac, I mean, we know that they lowers free T3 and free T4 levels. So you have to go into the whole endocrine system again, though, right? What do they do? They're messing with cortisol levels. So, I mean, they have all these papers, these people's cortisol levels went down temporarily while they were taking the medication, but it doesn't take into consideration what happens later. You can't mess with the cortisol system. If you mess with it, there'll be a negative feedback response later on. I mean, these medications lower thyroid levels. I mean, it just goes, I mean, I have so many papers that I discuss in the book about how this works and which ones do it. And I mean, medications are suppressing function. So of course they're going to lower thyroid. Thyroid levels, thyroid is a growth hormone. Things are supposed to be built if you have thyroid hormone, right? It's a building hormone. So if you're taking something that is basically negating your sympathetic nervous system, because that's what they do. Why is the sympathetic nervous system giving you anxiety? Why are these things happening? Because of this, and that. And if you gag that with the medication, these things are going to keep happening.